I never thought a day spent sweating over tent poles and tangled string lights could turn into something that changed everything. Honestly, I was just there to help out my friend's cousin set up the town carnival. You know, the usual small town summer thing, booths, games, that weird haunted house everyone complains about but secretly loves. I didn't expect to come away with a story that makes me smile in the middle of a boring Tuesday. So, there I was, standing in the middle of a dusty field just outside of town, wrestling with one of those giant canvas tents that refused to listen to me. I'm not exactly the strongest guy, but I'm no weakling either. At least, I thought. And then, out of nowhere, this kid, let's call him Jamie, showed up like he was born knowing how to handle carnival setups. He had this easy confidence about him, the kind that made you think he probably grew up running around fairs or something. Jamie's got this wild mop of dark hair that's always sticking up in different directions, like he's been running his hands through it all morning. And those green eyes? They kind of catch you off guard because they're bright, but also hold a little mischief. I didn't even know his name at first. I just saw this guy effortlessly moving between poles and ropes, like he was part of the whole operation. I was on my fourth attempt at getting the tent's roof stretched right when Jamie walked over, grinning like he knew some secret I didn't. "Here, let me help," he said, and before I could even respond, he took one corner of the canvas and pulled it tight like it was nothing. Watching him, I realized this wasn't just about muscle. It was some kind of art form. And maybe, just maybe, the way he looked at me when he smiled made the whole sweaty, exhausting morning feel a little less miserable. We started talking while we worked. Turns out, Jamie's been part of carnival setups for years. His family runs one of those traveling fairs. He's been all over the country, but this town's carnival was special to him, like coming home. I told him I was just filling in to help out a friend, not really knowing what to expect. He laughed, saying I looked like a city guy trying to rough it, which, okay, wasn't totally wrong. As the sun climbed higher, the carnival started to take shape. Colors popped against the blue sky, music started blaring from a speaker somewhere, and the smell of popcorn teased the air. We grabbed some bottled water from the pickup truck, and that's when things shifted, like the air between us got charged with something I didn't see coming. Jamie leaned in a little closer than before, his voice dropping just enough so I had to pay attention. "You're not like anyone I've met here," he said. "It's kinda refreshing." I didn't know what to say at first, which is weird because I usually have something snarky ready. But his eyes held mine, and suddenly I was aware of the heat rising to my cheeks, the way his hand brushed mine, reaching for the water bottle. Then, just as I was about to say something, anything, a shout came from behind us, and Jamie grabbed my arm, pulling me quickly behind the tents where the noise couldn't reach us. The sudden closeness, the way his grip was firm but gentle, it caught me totally off guard. And in that quiet, shadowed corner, with the carnival buzzing a few feet away, I realized I wanted to know exactly where this was going. That moment, that split second behind the tents, made me wonder if this summer was going to be way more than just setting up booths and hanging lights. But I couldn't have guessed just how much more. Behind the tents, everything felt different, quieter, like the world had shrunk down to just the two of us standing there with the distant carnival noise muffled into a hum. Jamie's hand was still around my wrist, not in a grab, more like a steady anchor, and I could feel my heart thumping louder than it should. I glanced over at him, trying to read whatever had pushed him to pull me away so suddenly. "What's up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, but honestly, it was probably the most awkward thing I'd said all day. Jamie didn't answer for a second. Instead, he looked down at where our hands met, then back up at my face, with those eyes that somehow managed to be playful and serious at the same time. "I don't usually do this," he said, and I raised an eyebrow, already curious. "Pull someone behind the tents, I mean." I laughed, nervously, trying to shake off that weird mix of excitement and panic rising in my chest. "Well, you're off to a great start then." He gave me a half smile, that crooked grin that made me want to lean in just to see it better. "I guess I just wanted to see if you were real." The way he said it caught me off guard, like I'd stumbled into some private joke I wasn't in on. "Real?" I echoed, trying to keep my tone light. But inside, I was suddenly way too aware of how close we were standing. Yeah, you just don't seem like the kind of guy who'd spend his Saturday wrestling with a tent in the middle of nowhere. You're too different. I don't know. I guess I wanted to see if you were actually here for the carnival, or just passing through. I shrugged, feeling heat creep into my cheeks. I'm here because a friend asked. Didn't expect to get pulled behind tents by a mystery carnival pro, though. That made him laugh, a low, easy sound that felt like sunshine breaking through a cloudy day. Mystery pro is a stretch. I'm just the guy who's been doing this long enough to know how to avoid getting tangled in ropes. I smiled. Good to know. Could have used your help earlier. He nudged me lightly with his shoulder. Next time, just ask. The sudden shift in our conversation made things feel lighter, but also somehow more electric. I couldn't help but notice the way the sunlight caught the angles of his face, how the dust motes danced in the light between us. There was something about Jamie, something that made the whole setup less like a chore and more like the start of something. We stood there for a few moments, neither of us saying much, just soaking it in. Then, out of nowhere, Jamie's hand slipped from my wrist and landed on my shoulder, firm but gentle. Hey, he said softly, you want to get out of here? Grab a drink or something? Once we finished this, of course. I blinked, surprised by the invitation, but not about to say no. Yeah, I'd like that. He smiled again, that same grin that made my stomach do flips. Cool, we'll make it a date. A date. The word lingered between us, warm and a little thrilling. We made our way back out from behind the tents, where the carnival was now fully alive. Music from the midway rides mixed with laughter and shouts, and the smell of fried dough and caramel apples hung in the air. The place had transformed from a dusty worksite into this buzzing, colorful world, and suddenly I was seeing it through a new lens. Jamie was back to his confident self, expertly handling the next batch of setup tasks, but every now and then, his eyes would flicker over to me like he was checking if I was still there. As the afternoon slid toward evening, we wrapped up the major stuff, and I found myself standing next to Jamie in front of a food stand, the carnival lights just starting to glow faintly in the early dusk. The air was sticky with heat and the sweetness of cotton candy. So, Jamie said, leaning in like he was about to share a secret, "You ever been to a carnival alone before?" I thought about it. Not really. Usually with friends or family. But today feels different. He nodded, eyes serious for a moment. Sometimes, you have to show up alone if you want to find something unexpected. I caught my breath, wondering what exactly he meant by that. Before I could ask, Jamie reached out and grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the food stand. Come on, first round's on me. I let myself be pulled along, heart doing that weird mix of nervous and excited that I hadn't felt in a long time. We ordered some sodas and sat on the edge of the grassy field, watching the carnival lights start to flicker on one by one. We talked about everything and nothing, the kind of easy conversation you have when you realize you want to spend more time with someone, but don't want to rush it. Jamie told me about his travels with the carnival, the weird shows he'd seen, the people he'd met. I shared stories about my city life, my crappy office job, and the little things that made me want to get out more. At some point, the sun dipped below the horizon and the night took over, wrapping us in this quiet bubble away from the rest of the world. Jamie's hand found mine again, and this time, I didn't pull away. I wasn't sure where this was going, but I knew one thing for sure. That day, setting up a carnival had turned into something I never saw coming. And I was more than ready to see where it led. The carnival was officially open, and the whole place buzzed with a mix of excitement and chaos that only fairs can pull off. Bright lights flashed from the rides, and the smell of popcorn and fried dough mingled with the low hum of distant music. Jamie and I found a spot near the carousel, sitting on a bench bruised from too many years outside, but it felt perfect, somehow grounding. We sat close enough that our legs brushed, and it was the kind of closeness that felt natural, like we'd known each other longer than a day. I kept stealing glances at Jamie, who was staring out at the crowd with this calm, almost nostalgic look. He looked like he belonged here, like the carnival was as much a part of him as the way he smiled or the way he tucked his dark hair behind his ear. So, I said, trying to sound casual but feeling my voice catch, "What's the best part of working at a carnival?" Jamie shrugged, still watching the people milling about. "Honestly, The moments like this, when the crowds are just starting to come in and everything smells new and a little hopeful. It's weird, but it feels like anything could happen. I nodded, feeling a strange warmth spread through me. Yeah, I didn't expect today to feel like that. I mean, helping set up a tent isn't exactly the highlight of my year. He turned toward me, eyes bright. Maybe you just needed the right company. I smiled, and before I could stop myself, I reached for his hand again. This time, there was no hesitation on either side, just fingers intertwining like they belonged there. It felt natural, like an unspoken agreement that neither of us wanted to let go. We spent the next hour wandering through the carnival together. Jamie showed me how to win those silly ring toss games, and we both ended up laughing when I missed every single shot. He teased me about my lack of skills, but I could tell he wasn't really bothered. There was a softness to him that wasn't obvious when we were working, something tender that made my chest ache in the best way. At one point, Jamie pulled me toward the Ferris wheel, the biggest ride in the carnival. The line wasn't long, and before I knew it, we were seated side by side in a creaky gondola, slowly rising over the fairgrounds. The lights below twinkled like stars scattered across a patchwork quilt, and I felt like I was seeing the whole world from a new perspective. "Look at that," Jamie said, nudging me gently. "Not bad for a first carnival, huh?" I laughed, feeling the tension in my chest start to unravel. "Not bad at all." As the wheel creaked on, we sat in comfortable silence, watching the world below us until the ride slowed and we climbed out. Jamie's hand found mine again and I squeezed it, a silent thank you for a day that had started out with nothing but sweat and ends up feeling like something I'd want to remember. We headed back toward the main area, and the crowd had thickened. Families chasing their kids, couples holding hands, groups of friends shouting over the noise. It struck me how easy it was to get lost in the chaos and still feel like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Jamie stopped suddenly in front of a small food stand selling caramel apples. "You want one?" he asked, eyes hopeful. I nodded, and we each grabbed one, the sticky sweetness a perfect contrast to the crisp night air. We found a quiet spot near the edge of the carnival, away from the main thoroughfare, and sat down on the grass. The stars overhead were just beginning to peek through the fading light, and the sounds of the carnival blended into a cozy background hum. "So," Jimmy said after a pause, biting into his apple, "what made you say yes to today?" "To all of this?" I thought about it, the way my usual routine felt stale and predictable, and how something about Jamie's easy confidence pulled me out of my comfort zone. I don't know, maybe I wanted to see if there was more out there for me, something unexpected. He smiled softly, eyes flickering over mine. "I get that. Sometimes you have to take a chance, even if you don't know where it's going." I nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle in my chest. "Yeah, sometimes." There was a pause, and then Jamie shifted closer, his hand brushing mine again. The electricity between us was undeniable now, like the whole night was charged with possibility. I looked at him, caught up in the moment, and suddenly it felt like the carnival wasn't just a backdrop. It was the start of something real, something I wanted to hold on to. Jamie leaned in slowly, giving me a chance to pull away, but I didn't. When our lips met, it was soft and tentative at first, but that hesitation melted away quickly. The world around us disappeared, leaving just the two of us in that quiet corner under the stars. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, Jamie grinned, that same crooked smile that had been with me all day. "See? I told you anything could happen." I laughed, heart racing, and realized he was right. Sometimes, the best stories start when you least expect them, and this one, this crazy, unexpected day, was just the beginning. The moment our lips parted, I felt like my whole world had shifted just a little. It wasn't some fireworks explosion or a movie-style everything changes kind of thing. It was quieter, softer, but no less real. Jamie's smile, that familiar crooked grin, was like a secret between us now, and it made my chest tight in the best possible way. We sat there, side by side on the grass, finishing our caramel apples and letting the sounds of the carnival wash over us. The laughter, the distant calls of game barkers, the occasional shriek from the roller coaster. It all blended into this perfect backdrop for a night that felt like it could stretch on forever. Jamie nudged me gently. "So what now? You gonna stick around for the whole carnival?" I shrugged, feeling like the last few hours had cracked open something inside me that I didn't know was there. "Honestly, I'm not sure. I was just supposed to help set up and then go home, but now I kinda want to see where this goes." He nodded, eyes shining with something I can only describe as hope. "Good answer, because we've got a long weekend ahead. Lots of rides, games, and maybe, if you're up for it, a few more moments like this." I laughed. The way he said it felt like an invitation and a promise all at once. "I'm up for it." The next few days blurred together in the best way possible. Jamie and I fell into a rhythm, working during the day, him with the carnival crew, me helping out where I could, and then wandering the carnival at night like two kids making the most of a summer adventure. I found myself looking forward to every moment, every shared smile, every touch that lingered just a little too long. One evening, after a long day of folding up tents and hauling gear, Jamie dragged me to the Ferris wheel again. This time, as we waited in line, he turned to me with that mischievous grin and said, "I've got a confession." I raised an eyebrow, trying not to smile. "Oh, yeah? What kind?" He leaned closer, like he was about to spill some huge secret. "I'm terrible at first dates," I chuckled, shaking my head. "How do you figure?" He shrugged, eyes sparkling. "Because I'm way too nervous, and I overthink everything." I reached out and gave his hand a squeeze. "You don't seem nervous to me." "Yeah, well, you're the exception," he said, his voice softer now. The ride started, lifting us slowly above the carnival lights once again. The world below looked magical, and I realized I was exactly where I wanted to be. "Jamie," I said quietly, "I'm really glad you pulled me behind those tents." He looked at me with a smile, one that made my heart skip. "Me too." As the Ferris wheel came to a stop, we stepped off and meandered toward the food stands. Jamie bought us some fried dough, and we shared it like it was the best meal either of us had ever had. Over the next couple of days, we grew even closer. We swapped stories about our pasts. Jamie told me about his family's traveling carnival and how it had been both a blessing and a curse growing up on the road. I opened up about my work life and how I'd always felt a little stuck in the city, like I was missing something important. One night, after the carnival closed, Jamie invited me to the crew's campground behind the fairgrounds. It was a little rough around the edges, trailers, tents, and the smell of campfires, but there was something warm and authentic about it. The crew welcomed me like I was part of the family, and I realized this wasn't just some weekend fling for Jamie. This was his life. We sat around the fire, the orange glow flickering on everyone's faces as stories were shared and laughter filled the air. Jamie leaned into me, and I rested my head on his shoulder without hesitation. It hit me then how much I'd been craving this connection, belonging, something real. But as much as I wanted to stay wrapped up in that moment, a little voice in the back of my mind reminded me that I couldn't avoid reality forever. I had a job, responsibilities, a life back in the city. The thought made my chest tighten, and I pulled back slightly, looking up at the stars. Jamie noticed, his expression turning serious. "Hey," he said softly, "what's on your mind?" I hesitated, then confessed, "I don't know how to make this work. I don't even know if I want to go back to my old life." He nodded slowly, like he understood more than I was saying. "Sometimes you don't have to have all the answers right away. You just have to take it one day at a time." That felt like the kind of advice I needed, even if it was scary. We stayed up late that night, talking about everything and nothing, until the stars faded and the first light of morning crept in. When I finally left the campground, I felt something shift inside me, a sense that maybe I was ready to take a chance on something new. Over the next few days, I found myself dreaming about Jamie and the carnival, about the way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. And when the carnival finally packed up to move on, I had a decision to make. But that's a story for another time. The morning the carnival was packing up to leave town, there was this quiet tension in the air, like the whole place knew something was ending. I stood beside Jamie as the crew folded up tents and dismantled booths, the familiar buzz of the fairgrounds toned down to a slow, methodical rhythm. Jamie caught me watching him, that same crooked smile tugging at his lips, but there was something softer in his eyes today. You look like you're thinking 1,000 miles away, he said, nudging me gently. I shrugged, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I guess I am. I didn't expect to get this attached to anything. He nodded, folding a canvas tarp with practiced ease. Carnivals have a way of doing that. They sneak up on you. The crew was all busy, shouting orders, sharing jokes, and the energy was high, but I felt like I was moving in slow motion, caught between two worlds. The one I'd come from, with its safe routines and predictable days, and this wild, messy, beautiful life Jamie had. Hey, Jamie said, breaking into my thoughts. What are you gonna do when we leave? I swallowed hard. I don't know. Go back to the city, probably. But I'm not sure if that's what I want anymore. He paused, looking thoughtful. Then, slowly, he reached out and took my hand. You don't have to decide everything right now. I looked at him, the warmth of his hand grounding me. But I feel like I should. Like I owe it to myself to figure it out. Jamie smiled softly. Sometimes, the best decisions come from just following what feels right, not what you think you should. His words hit me differently than anything else had that summer. Maybe it was the way he said it, or the way the late afternoon light softened the edges of everything, but I suddenly realized I didn't want to lose him, not without at least trying to see where it could go. The rest of the day passed in a blur, and before I knew it, the carnival was packed up, the empty field standing quiet and bare, like it had never been alive. Jamie and I stood by his truck, the air thick with unspoken questions. So, I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady, "What now? Do you want me to come with you? Hit the road with the carnival?" He laughed, a little surprised. I wasn't expecting that. I shrugged. I mean, why not? It's crazy, but it feels right. Jamie looked at me, the mischievous spark in his eyes returning. You're full of surprises. We climbed into his truck and drove out of the field together, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I didn't know exactly where the road would take us, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. That night, under a blanket of stars, Jamie and I lay side by side in the back of the truck, the sounds of distant crickets filling the silence. I turned to him, feeling a calm I hadn't felt in years. I said softly, "I think this might be the start of something." He smiled, pulling me closer. Yeah, me too. And just like that, the carnival wasn't just a place or a moment anymore. It was us. Messy, unexpected, and somehow perfect. The next morning, the sun filtered through the thin fabric of the truck's tarp, casting warm stripes across Jamie's face. I woke up slower than usual, the kind of slow where you don't want to move, because everything feels right exactly as it is. I glanced over, and he was still asleep, chest rising and falling steadily, that wild mop of hair tousled like he'd just wrestled with the wind. I smiled softly, the quiet hum of the carnival crew starting to stir not far off a background soundtrack to this moment. It was strange how quickly this life was becoming normal for me. The smell of popcorn in the air, the creak of old rides gearing up, the way Jamie's hand felt in mine like it belonged there. Eventually, Jamie blinked awake and caught me just staring. "Morning," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I replied, squeezing his hand. We climbed out and joined the crew for breakfast, a patchwork group of people who'd all become oddly familiar in just a few days. Pancakes, bacon, and the endless chatter about who had the worst sunburn or the weirdest thing they'd found while packing up the night before. Jamie introduced me around, and I felt like I was stepping into a new world, a chaotic, dusty, heart-pounding kind of family. After breakfast, Jamie pulled me aside. "You ready for your first real day on the road?" I nodded, suddenly nervous and excited all at once. "I think so." We loaded up into the old carnival truck, the engine rumbling to life as we pulled away from the empty field. The road ahead stretched out, an open invitation smeared with possibility. Jamie reached over and linked our fingers, like he was making sure I was really there. "This is gonna be good," he said. We drove for hours, the conversation easy at first, Jamie talking about the quirks of carnival life, the places he'd been, the people he'd met. Then it got quieter, more thoughtful. There were moments when the only sound was the hum of tires on asphalt and the soft squeeze of his hand. By the time we reached the next town, The sun was dipping low, and the sky was painted in deep oranges and purples. The new spot was a grassy field just outside the town's edge, smaller than the last, but buzzing with its own kind of energy. We jumped right into setting up, Jamie slipping effortlessly into his role like this was where he belonged. I found myself moving faster than I thought I would, fueled by adrenaline and the thrill of being part of something bigger than myself. Later that evening, after the last light was hung and the first rides tested, Jamie and I found a quiet spot behind the food stands. The night air was cool, and the carnival lights glowed softly behind us. He turned to me, eyes bright. "You're doing better than I expected," I laughed, wiping the sweat off my brow. "Guess I'm a quick learner." He smiled, and for a moment we just looked at each other, the space between us electric. "Hey," Jamie said suddenly, "can I ask you something?" "Shoot," I said. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you think we could do this?" Us. Not just these weekends, but longer. I didn't have to think about it. "Yeah," I said, voice steady. "I want to try." His grin was contagious, and he pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home. That night, we stayed up late in the camper trailer Jamie shared with a couple of the crew members. We talked about everything: the future, fears, hopes. I told him about my city life, the parts one missed and the parts one didn't. He shared stories from the road, the freedom and the loneliness it could bring. But no matter the topic, there was this unshakable feeling that we were starting something real, something worth holding on to. Over the next few weeks, life on the road settled into a rhythm. We'd wake early, work hard under the brutal sun, and spend nights chasing the carnival lights or just lying under the stars, hands intertwined. The crew became a little family, and I found myself growing more comfortable with the unpredictability. Jamie and I grew closer, the kind of closeness that's built on trust and shared moments, like the time I almost passed out on the tilt-a-whirl, and he caught me, steadying me with a laugh. Or when we stayed up late planning our next stop, dreaming about what could come after the carnival. One night, after a long day in a new town, Jamie pulled me behind one of the trailers, the stars bright overhead. "You remember that day back in that field?" he asked quietly. I smiled. How could I forget? He looked at me then, something tender in his eyes. "I'm glad you said yes to all of this." I squeezed his hand. "Me too. I've never felt more alive." He leaned in, and our lips met again beneath the vast, open sky, a promise of whatever was coming next. Because in the crazy, dusty, spinning world of the carnival, I found something I never expected: home. Months passed, and the carnival kept moving from town to town. But somehow, time felt less like a countdown and more like a collection of moments, each one layering on top of the last, building something steady between Jamie and me. We learned each other's rhythms, how he liked his coffee black, how I got restless if I stayed still too long, the way a simple touch could say more than words ever could. One evening, after the last show of the night, we sat together on a bench near the ticket booth, the glow of the lights soft around us. The crowd had thinned, and the world felt quiet in that way that only comes when you've shared something real all day. Jamie nudged me gently. "You ever think about what comes after all this? The carnival, I mean." I looked out across the empty midway, the rides standing still, their lights blinking in slow pulses. "I do. I don't know exactly what it looks like yet, but I know I want you in it." He smiled, eyes crinkling at the corners. "I want that too." There wasn't a big, sweeping declaration or some dramatic moment, just two guys sitting side by side, hands clasped, comfortable in the silence between words. It felt right, like everything we'd been building was folding into a future we wanted to take on together. When the carnival packed up for the season and the crew scattered, Jamie and I stayed behind in the little town where the whole thing had started for us. We found a small apartment with creaky floors and too many windows, but it had space for both of us. The routines were different now, no more tents or rides to set up, but the feeling of coming home didn't fade. Sometimes I still think about that first day, wrestling with the tent, and how a chance pull behind the tents turned everything upside down. It's funny how life works like that, how unexpected moments can change the whole course of things. Now, as I sit here next to Jamie, laughter spilling from the kitchen where he's making too much pasta, I feel a quiet kind of happiness. Not the flashy kind, but the steady, real kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. That summer taught me a lot about taking chances, about finding connection in the most unlikely places, and about being open to whatever comes next. And honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything.